Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Australia once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel quite a few times before. Now, these guys are quite a well-established and well-respected name within their local craft beer scene, and if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're probably best known for their different kinds of IPAs. They do some really good hazy IPAs, and I've also had some really nice West Coasters from them as well. But from what I've seen, they do quite a wide variety of different styles, and it's probably also fair to describe this brewery as being very well-rounded. But the beer that we're going to have a look at from them today is a style that I have had from this brewery before. It's a style I know they can do very well, one that I really quite enjoy too, and it's also one of their latest releases as of the time of filming, which is September 2025. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one's going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, like I said, we are going to head down to Australia. We're going to go to the state of Queensland, the city of Brisbane, and to be specific, we are going to go to the district of Newstead. And that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Range Brewing. So this particular beer is called Miles to Go. It comes in at 8.2% ABV, and this one is a West Coast Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this is yet another beer that I picked up at the wonderful Gur Beer in the One Mall in Chimshatri in Kowloon here in Hong Kong. These guys always get a good selection of Australian beers, and of course I get quite a few of my Aussie things from out of the brew in Sheung Wan over on Hong Kong Island as well. But I'm quite glad that I've got good access to Australian beers these days, because the Aussie beer scene has grown a lot since I was there back in about 2015, and there is some really good stuff available there. So yeah, Range Brewing do some really nice IPAs, and they're definitely one of the Queensland breweries that you need to check out should you get the chance. If you are of course particularly interested in Australian craft beer, make sure you check out my friend Sam Smalley over at Short and Stout Beer Reviews. I'll try to remember to put the link to his channel in the video description below, but he covers the Aussie beer scene a lot more than I do, of course. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. My first review from Range in about 4 months or something like that, if memory serves me correctly. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Range Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the fairly near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Aussie playlist along with a number of other things. That's been added to quite regularly, of course, because like I said, we get a good selection of Aussie beer here in Hong Kong. Long may it continue. But do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days, even if I do say so myself. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Range Brewing once again then. So, Range Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in the Newstead district of central Brisbane in Queensland, and the company was founded back in 2017 by Matt McIver and Gerard Martin, and who they were joined in the very early stages as well by Mitch Pickford. So the original two, Matt and Gerard, are childhood friends, and they lived abroad in London. So Matt worked for Brewdog in Soho and was also the brand manager of the London Craft Beer Festival. Gerard, on the other hand, is an engineer by trade, and he worked in mechanical and manufacturing engineering, but in London he was working for Vitso. But apparently the idea that these guys had to start their own brewery came after a few too many beers, but they wanted to be able to travel and sample the best beers in the world and then go home and brew their own versions of these. So Matt and Gerard contacted their friend Mitch, who happened to be a talented brewer. He was working for Catchment Brewing in Brisbane, and he was of course really interested to get on board with the project, and soon Matt and Gerard were back home in Queensland building their own brewery. So originally they had planned to start the brewery in their hometown of Toowoomba, which is about 2 hours to the west of Brisbane. Very nice place. I do recommend that you go and visit it if you get the chance. But they soon decided that Toowoomba wouldn't be the best fit, and so they opted to move the brewery east to Brisbane. So the brewery opened in early 2018 in an old warehouse in the Newstead district, and they've got an on-site tap room there as well, which sells pizzas, which are supposed to be very, very good. So again, this sounds like a place that I need to go and do an out and about video at some stage. But over the years, they've expanded their brewery infrastructure, and in 2022 they opened a second tap room in Abbotsford in Melbourne, which also acts as their southern distribution hub. But until 2022 they didn't have a core range of beer. They were producing lots and lots of different things, but at that point in 2022 they introduced the Disco as their first, quotes, forever beer as they put it. And over the last few years they've continued to develop a lot of different recipes, expand into experimenting with different styles, and as of September 2025, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 850 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Range Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd, and Beer Advocate doesn't exist anymore, so you can check out the Untappd page as well to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done, and there are quite a few of them listed on their website as well. But yeah, that's that. So let's go on and actually have a little look at this beer itself. So like I mentioned to you at the start of the video, this one is an 8.2% West Coast Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. This one is brewed with Chinook, Citra, Idaho 7 and a new experimental hop called CIP 014. Chinook, Citra and Idaho 7, as we know, are American hops. Chinook's about 12% alpha acid. It's going to give you a lovely kind of grapefruity character and quite a lot of piney resin. Citrus 14% alpha acid. It's going to give you an oily sort of mango in a West Coast IPA and quite a little bit of lychee, gooseberry character along with a wee bit of lemon and limey note. Idaho 7 is about 14% alpha acid as well, and it's going to lean quite toward that kind of nice oily apricot and slightly pineapple-y note in a West Coast IPA. I did a little bit of research on CIP 14. This is a New Zealand hop. It's produced by Clayton Hops, gives 12 to 14% alpha acid, and apparently it's known for its peach, passion fruit and orangey characteristics. So we'll need to see how that turns out in West Coast IPAs. But I have to say, there has been a little bit of a kind of uptake again in interest in the West Coast IPA style, which I'm really thankful for. I've missed these beers, but seeing all these new hops that have developed over the last kind of 7-8 years, since the New England IPAs have come in, and seeing these actually tested in West Coast IPAs now is really quite interesting, because it really shows you how differently hops will behave depending on what malt base and what yeast and things you put them with. So yeah, Idaho 7 of course was one that really kind of came to fame during the haze craze days, but yeah, seeing it tested now in West Coast IPAs is pretty interesting. But anyway, that's all the technical stuff about the beer. I'll let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. There you can see it's quite similar to what we've seen from Range Brewing before. There you can see the sort of Range square prism, I guess you could call it, on the top of the can there. Plain silver top on this one, incidentally. It's a 440 milliliter can, this, and it says on the back here, Miles to Go is a modern, punchy West Coast double IPA brimming with Chinook, Citra Cryo, Idaho 7 Hyper Boost and a brand new experimental hop, CIP 14 from Clayton Hops. Accept miles of tropical pineapple and passion fruit, followed by a nice hit of classic West Coast citrus, finishing crispy, clean and dry. Sounds pretty good, I have to say. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass then and see how we go. The Miles to Go 8.2% West Coast double IPA. So yeah, one of the main differences, or there's mainly two main differences between a West Coast IPA and a New England, but the first of those is that the West Coast IPA relies primarily on barley malt for its malt base. The New England IPAs use a good little bit of wheat and oat as well. It's not unheard of to use a little bit of wheat and oat in a West Coast IPA, but it's very, very minimal amounts. The New England IPAs use quite a lot of it. The other difference is in the way that you hop these beers, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah, and we've poured maybe about 60% of this beer out and into the glass at the moment, and you can see it's poured quite nicely. Quite a soapy head on this one. In fact, you can see it's maybe got about a quarter finger of a soapy, I would say, kind of perfect white head on it there. That's going to fade away quite quickly. There's a wee island of bubbles in the middle of the head there, but yeah, lovely kind of soapy bubbles there, and that head isn't retaining all that well actually. I could have given it a bit more of an aggressive pour in fairness, but hey ho, that's life. But yeah, colour-wise, this one pours a lovely kind of pale golden straw colour. You can see if I put my hand behind the glass as well, it is actually pretty clear. The sort of opacity you're seeing on it is due to the condensation on the glass. But yeah, when it comes to the West Coast IPA style category, for me, there's kind of two ways that this beer can lean, or two ends of the spectrum if you like. These beers can be a little bit more kind of bready and biscuity, such as the Pliny the Elder from Russian River Brewing, or they can be a little bit more oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo. Those for me are the two kind of benchmarks. They were the ones that really showed me the two ends of the spectrum with these beers. But just judging by the colour of this one and the fact that it's a little bit more kind of blonde rather than being amber, I think this is going to be a more kind of bready and biscuity affair if you like. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, the length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker coloured beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to the IPA style category. But yeah, going by the colour of this one, I'm betting on a more bready and kind of biscuity West Coast IPA. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one, a couple of steady streams going up toward the surface of the liquid there, but in honesty I think we've said everything we really need to about the appearance of this beer. So yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the aroma of this one then and see what it's all about. I'm very, very curious about this, like I said. Oh, right, okay, this is interesting. I'm going to say straight away, the aroma of this one is not madly punchy, okay? So it's actually quite mild and quite soft and juicy and tropical leaning, and you know, you kind of expect that from the Idaho 7 and the Citra in this one. You'd think Chinook would give it a little bit more punchiness, but maybe the CJP or is it CIP or CJP? CIP 14, maybe that's kind of giving it a lot more oiliness as well, because of course the New Zealand hops, especially in West Coast IPAs, you can really notice that kind of soft, wet, oily character out of the Kiwi hops. You can notice that a lot more in West Coast IPAs, I think, than the New Englands, to be honest with you. But yeah, aroma wise, very wet, fruity character, a lot of like wet, freshly cut grass. And then yeah, you've got the bready malt and the kind of sweetness behind it. It's a really nice smelling beer actually, but that's a very kind of rough summary of it. So let's just break that aroma down then and describe it for you a bit more in depth. As I say, I'm surprised that there's very little head on this one, but we'll see what we get when we pour the rest in later on. But yeah, aroma wise, the backbone of this beer, for me, it's a lovely kind of fresh brown bready bread crust that's coming out of this one. Maybe a mix of brown bread, like wholemeal brown bread and white bready character that's in there. But yeah, there's a little bit of a kind of soft, woody kind of character out of it too. I always get a little bit of woodiness out of these beers. Jacob's cream cracker. I'm getting a little bit of like soft and slightly sweet wholemeal brown bread in there. Fluffier white bread as well. But yeah, there's a lot of like McVitie's digestive biscuit. Definitely some sweeter caramel in there as well. And yeah, the boozy side of this beer, it's definitely more of like a concentrated biscuit oil, to be honest with you. So yeah, the way that this kind of hoppy, the way that the hoppy side of this beer goes together, I think is really very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that regard. The malty side of this one is quite interesting, and it comes across as quite oily actually. But one thing you have to bear in mind is that, you know, malts from different geographical regions can be quite different. Like European malts, such as the German crystal malts, which are commonly used to brew these styles, they tend to be quite crisp and quite dry. They are North American malts like the Turo and things like that, they tend to be a little bit more oily and sweet. And the Australian malts I've found, and the Kiwi malts as well to an extent, are a little bit in between. And I'm pretty sure most of the Aussie breweries will be using Aussie malt, maybe with a bit of complement of German or something like that, unless they're doing something special. But yeah, this one, you can tell the sort of breadiness in there. It's got a wee bit of dryness to it, but it has a little bit of that oiliness that you expect from kind of American malts too. So pretty sure this is an Aussie malty beer. So yeah, the bready character in this one, the more you smell of it, the kind of sweeter it gets. And yeah, the biscuity side of this one is quite nice too, I have to say that. But I think we've said everything we really need to about the malty part of the aroma of this beer. And I think we can go on to the I think we can go on to the yeasty side of things. But yeah, the yeasty side of the beer for me is quite interesting. At the back of the nose, there's definitely a little bit of a more kind of brown bready character out of this one, so you get that sweet kind of wholemeal brown bready sort of note out of it. There's a little bit of a kind of more crisp white bready character in there, but I will say the yeasty side of the beer is kind of sweeter rather than drier in honesty, and you get a wee bit of like a fresh kind of white bready bread crust coming out of that part of it as well. So yeah, the way that all of that side of the beer kind of pieces together, I think is really very, very nice. So the malty yeasty side of this beer for me, it's kind of smooth, a little bit dry, but mostly oily and sweet. So yeah, I think that covers that part of the beer. So let's have a look at the hoppy side of things then. So yeah, for me, the hoppy side of this beer, when it comes to brewing an IPA, there are 3 types of hoppings that you can do incidentally. So you've got early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour or so of the wort boil. That gives you a deeper, danker character, and it's responsible for the vast majority of your bitterness. You've got late addition hopping within the latter half hour of your wort boil, so it gives you a little bit of bitterness, mainly flavouring when it gives you a very bright green component. Then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete. That's all about flavour and aroma, and again it gives you a very bright green component. Now, New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping, which is why they're kind of softer and more juicy if you like. West Coast IPAs tend to rely on all 3 types of hopping, which is why they're deeper, danker, more oily and more bitter. But there was a period during the kind of haze craze, if you like, where a lot of breweries were using New England type hopping tactics, if you like, in their West Coast IPA recipes. So you didn't get quite as much bitterness from the West Coast IPAs as you did back in the day. And I think to an extent that has recovered, but not completely, if you like. I do miss these big, bitter West Coast IPAs. And I'm going to just say that from the aroma that this one's having, I wonder if this is going to be a more like modern, it's going to use the more kind of modern hopping take on the West Coast IPA style, because the green component really isn't madly pungent actually. But we have had beers that have surprised us in that regard in the past, so we'll go into it with an open mind. But let's look at the aroma of the green component then. So for me, the green component, there's a little tiny bit of earthiness in there. I'm getting a wee bit of herbal and woody sort of character out of it as well. And then yeah, some lovely floral aromaticity, a nice big bright grassy component as well. So yeah, lovely big bright grassy component, but overall the green component in this one is pretty damn oily. But you have to remember here that we've got cryo in this beer and also the hyper boost as well. So these are hop oil products, and that might be one of the reasons why the green component isn't quite as dank and pungent as we would have got from these beers back in the day when it was all about the little T40 pellets. Hop technology, or yeah, the technology associated with producing hops has changed quite a lot. So we'll see how this one kind of turns out in the actual flavour. But that covers the green component. In terms of the fruity side of the aroma then, just to round off, for me, yeah, I can smell a little bit of like peach in this one. There's a lot of kind of oily mango in there. There's passion fruit as well, pineapple for sure. And yeah, there's definitely the apricot sort of thing. So the mango and apricot I think will be coming from the Citra and the Idaho 7 in this one. I'm surprised there's not a wee bit more grapefruit in this from the Chinook in all honesty, and a wee bit of like piney resin as well. The Chinook I think is taking a bit of a back seat because of the cryo oil in honesty. But yeah, I'm getting quite a little bit of that kind of peachy note, which I think is going to be the New Zealand experimental hop. And I'm getting little bits of like gooseberry, almost kind of lychee, and slightly limey characters, which I think will be from the Citra as well. So yeah, the way that everything kind of goes together in this one, I think, is really quite interesting. So yeah, the way that the aroma in this one pieces together is quite nice. In terms of the malty and yeasty side of character, it's kind of what I expected when I actually just had a look at the beer. But yeah, the fruity side of this one comes across as being a little bit more oily and modern in a sense, but that might well be due to those hop concentrate products. Can we call them that? The hop oil products that have been used in this, the Dino Boost and the cryo, which really weren't a big thing back in the day when I was first getting into this beer style, if you like. But yeah, aroma-wise it smells great. Take a little bit of time to enjoy that aroma before you get stuck into the beer. But yeah, I think it is time for us to taste this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Miles to Go, a West Coast double IPA, 8.2% ABV from the wonderful Range Brewing in Newstead, Brisbane in Queensland down in Australia. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh, that's nice. Right. First impression of it is, this is a very, very clean, slick, and kind of oily West Coast IPA. It's not very bitter at all. I'm going to say that straight away. This one, I'm waiting to see if it builds, but I'm not getting much in the way of, yeah, I'm really not getting much in the way of big bitterness building in this one, but it goes together, as I say, really, really quite nicely. I really like this, actually. So it's definitely one of the more modern takes on the West Coast IPA style. Lower bitterness, big oily fruity characters, and of course all these kind of cryo sorts of things. But yeah, I do have to wonder if the West Coast IPA had remained kind of top of the pile, if you like, would we have gone down these kind of cryo oil routes and things like that in the same way that we had, because you know the sort of juiciness and softness is something that really kind of came along with the New England IPAs. So yeah, it's a little bit of food for thought that I always find when I try West Coast IPAs that are using these sorts of things. So I wonder if we will return to a more general big bitterness with the West Coast IPAs. But I have to say, this is quite nice. It took me a little bit of time to be convinced by using the modern hop technology and the modern kind of hopping, if that makes sense, the modern hopping method in these beers. But you know, they can be quite nice if they're done well, and Range are of course going to do these things well. But yeah, for me, quite a biscuity, oily West Coast IPA, this one, with big oily fruity notes, and it goes together nicely. So let's just break the flavour of this one down then and describe it for you a little bit more in depth, as we always do. So yeah, the backbone of this beer, if you go to the middle third of your palate then, the backbone of the beer, you've got a lovely kind of fresh, like wholemeal brown bready bread crust in there, although, you know, kind of somewhere in the middle. It's got a little bit of brown bready character, a little bit of kind of white bready character as well. But then yeah, as you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more kind of woodiness coming out of it. So there's that little touch of woody character further forward, then you've got a smattering of kind of Jacob's cream cracker. I always get that base layer of bread crust cracker and a wee touch of woodiness. Must just be my palate. But yeah, above that you get a layer of like a slightly more dense but sweet wholemeal brown bready character coming out of the beer. But yeah, on top of that, there's a bit more of a kind of fluffier white bread. So you can feel a little bit of that fluffy white bread in there, but again, because it's a West Coast IPA, that middle 30 palate, the flavours are quite compressed together. So it does have a wee bit of density to it, and you get a little bit more sweetness out of the brown bread and the white bread the further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, the way that that all kind of pieces together in this one, I think is quite nice. On top of the white bready layer, you'd start to get the kind of brown sugary side of things. So for me, you've got a kind of almost very slightly toasty caramelly note forming the base of that. Then above that, you've got the toasty caramelly base. Then you've got a big circle in the middle of your palate, which is like a really concentrated hoppy oil, not hoppy oil, it's like a really concentrated McVitie's Digestive biscuity oil there. And then yeah, you've got a more crisp McVitie's Digestive biscuity character kind of around the edge of that. So yeah. So yeah, the way that this yeah, the way that this kind of goes together in the malty side of things, I really do like, and it's quite different to the other more bready, biscuity leaning West Coast IPAs that I've had in recent times, just because this one overall feels that little bit more oily. But I think we've covered everything we need to in the middle third of the palate with this beer, in honesty. So let's go to the back third of the palate then. As I've often said, sweeter flavours will come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours will come out further back, but generally speaking, the flavours between middle and back third of your palate won't vary too much, they'll just come out at different intensities. So yeah, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there, the kind of brown bread in the base, the fluffier white bread on top of that, and maybe a wee bit of the more crisp side of the biscuity sort of things just kind of coming out on top of that. But yeah, the base of that back third of your palate is the kind of white bready bread crust again, but it feels that little bit drier. On top of that, you've got a bit more of a you've got a little bit more of a Jacob's cream crackery character coming out of it, and then yeah, you've got the wholemeal sort of brown bready layer, which feels a little bit lighter, taller and more airy. There's still a wee bit of sweetness to it. Then above that again, you've got the white bready layer that comes out of this one, a little bit lighter, taller and more airy once again, which I do really like. And then just creeping over the top of that, you've got a bit of a softer McVitie's digestive biscuity kind of character too. So again, these are things that I really do quite like in this particular beer. So yeah. There's a little bit the drier side of the biscuit creeping over the top there. But yeah, above everything else on that back third of your palate, you start to get the kind of yeasty side of the beer coming out. So for me, the yeasty side of this beer is quite interesting because it does add a little bit of dryness into the aftertaste. So at its core, it's got a sweeter, more wholemeal, brown bready sort of note to it. Then around that, you've got a bit of a slightly drier brown bread, then a wee bit of white bread and kind of bread crusty character there. And it just gives you that little bit of graininess, and there's wee touches of cracker in there. But all of that sits on top of the back third of your palate there. So definitely, yeah, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of compresses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the yeasty character does linger there into the aftertaste a wee bit, but the biscuity side of the malt base really is the main focus, I think, on the malty side of the beer. So yeah, I think we can go on and have a little look at the hoppy side of things then. So in the back corners of the palate, you've got that little touch of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it gives you a wee bit of a herbally, woody sort of thing, and there's maybe a wee tiny bit of pine resin. But yeah, as you move further forward along the sides of your palate, you get the floral aromaticity, then the more zesty kind of grassiness around the front curve of your tongue. But overall, that green component is really kind of big and oily, I would say. So yeah, the way that everything pieces together in this one, I think, is very, very nice. Green component I do really like. So let's focus on that front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of things with the beer. So yeah, the front third of your palate then, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get that little bit of bready build up in there, the wholemeal brown bread in the base, the fluffier white bread on top of that, then the more oily biscuity sort of thing. The base of the front third of your palate, fresh white bready bread crust in there, a little bit of kind of brown bready bread crust as well, the crackery layer, the wholemeal brown bread, the white bread, then yeah, that more oily, biscuity and slightly caramelly note. I do feel you get a little bit more caramel out of this beer the further into it that you go, but the actual flavour that you're getting from that brown sugary side of things is like concentrated McVitie's digestive biscuit syrup. It really is like that. But yeah, the fruity side of things then, as I always say, you get that nice oily bubble on the top of that front third of your palate where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a wee look at that. We'll start at the back first. So yeah, for me, the fruity side of this beer, I'm not really getting the grapefruit that I would have expected from Chinook, incidentally. But yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you can feel the kind of peachy note on the top, which I'm guessing is the Kiwi experimental hop. So you can feel a little bit of that peachy note in there. But yeah, there's big, oily, mangoes out of this one. I get a lot of like passion fruit out of this, and the passion fruit for me really lingers into the aftertaste with the beer. But yeah, as you move further forward from that, there's a bit more of a there's a little bit more of an apricot-y sort of note to it, and a little bit more of a there's a little bit more of a kind of pineapple-y kind of note in there as well. So those tropical notes for me are really kind of forming the basis of the beer, but of the fruity side of things. But as you move further forward, I do feel you get a little touch of like gooseberry and kind of lychee thing. You get that from Citra quite often. But then toward the very front tip of your tongue, I think there's a little touch of lime. So you do get a wee bit of that citrus hit out of the beer into the aftertaste. But I think Citra's the hop out of these that is most likely to be responsible for that. The Idaho 7's the one that's going to give you a bit of the mango, a bit of the apricot, and the Citra I think is going to give you more of that mango, quite a bit of the passion fruit, and I think the experimental hop's probably going to give you quite a bit of pineapple and the kind of peachy notes that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, the fruity side of this one's quite interesting, but like I say, I would have liked a little bit more kind of bitterness out of this one, just a wee bit more of the Chinook, a bit more early edition hopping, just to take the IBU up of this. There's nothing like wrong with the way the flavours are coming out in this one in my mind, but yeah, personally I just like a wee bit more bitterness out of a West Coast IPA, but still this one is very enjoyable to drink in that sense. I think this is a good point to move away from the flavour. We've covered that and round off the review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, mouthfeel wise, I'd say this beer, it's very easy to drink for an 8.2%er. We can safely say that. So yeah, it is really quite easy to drink. It's got a lovely, very smooth mouthfeel to it, quite oily and slick, very, very clean as well. We can safely say that. I'd say that this beer is pretty much mid-bodied, right in the middle of the spectrum. So yeah, that's quite interesting. In terms of the IBU in this one, I think it's kind of like I think it's quite low. I think this is about 20 IBUs, if that, to be honest with you. I don't think it's even 30, which is what you'd get out of like a Pilsner or a New England IPA, in honesty. So yeah, that's an interesting point to make about this one. The IBU is very low. I think that's primarily down to the use of the cryo oil. But the malt base in there, it's got a wee bit of dryness underneath, smoothness in the middle, then an oily sweetness on top. And then yeah, you've got a big oily, fruity character out of this one. And yeah, the fruitiness is more leaning toward the tropical side of things, but you get a wee bit of citrus into the aftertaste too. But all in all, a really nice, enjoyable beer, this one. As I say, my only criticism of it is that I do expect a wee bit more IBU from a West Coast IPA, but they do say on the can, in fairness, that it is a modern West Coast IPA, so kind of expect the New England type hopping with this one, a very low IBU beer this. But yeah, really like the flavour of this one, but for me, I just want a wee bit more bitterness, that's it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and it does make me even more curious to go and actually visit Range Brewing in Newstead in Brisbane. I've really enjoyed my time in Brisbane before, incidentally. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. So yeah, this one was the Miles to Go, a West Coast double IPA, 8.2% ABV from Range Brewing in Newstead, Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. An interesting hop in this one, which I hope we'll see more from as well, the CIP14. I love my Kiwi hops, and I think that's also contributing to the kind of oily nature that this beer has. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Range Brewing as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until the next time, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out Range Brewing social media, check out my friend Sam over at Short and Stout Beer Reviews, and I'll see you guys in another review very, very soon. Ciao just now.